Hello and warm greetings. Welcome to the special session of the Analyst by Vajiram and Ravi, where we would try to comprehensively analyze the budget in two different sections. In the analysis part, we'll first have a comprehensive discussion with respect to the various aspects of the Union Budget 25-26, along with the important economic and financial initiatives taken by the government. Then, in the simplified section, we'll have a sectoral analysis of the Union Budget with respect to the articles mentioned in the Indian Express, along with the value addition. So stay tuned. So coming to the very first discussion of the day, this is with respect to the Union Budget 2025-26. So the much awaited Union Budget 25-26 is here, and the Honorable Finance Minister presented the budget with the broad theme of Sabka Vikas, which primarily emphasizes the importance of inclusive development, that is incorporating the aspirations of every section of the society. And this also incorporates the balanced growth aspect, that is considering the needs of all the regions equitably. Now, what you need to understand is, I would like to clarify two things here. The very first is the importance and relevance of Union Budget. See, budget is something which is important for all the sections of the society in all the classes, be it a tea seller or be it an industrialist. So definitely it becomes very important. Now, since you are an aspirant, it becomes more important for you, considering that Union Budget has a very strong weightage in the overall examination. That is the first aspect. Second is the fear surrounding upon the understanding of the budget. See, budget definitely incorporates a lot of data and numbers with it, right? But as civil services aspirant, what we need to focus upon is the substance of the budget. That is, what have been the key economic policy initiatives which have been taken by the government, be it in the education sector, be it in the infrastructure, be it in the agriculture, and what have been the financial initiatives taken by the government, for example, be it the taxation, right? So we have to focus more upon the substance rather than on the numbers. Now, again, what I'm trying to say is that it's not like you don't have to focus on the numbers. So definitely for very important macroeconomic indicators, be it the fiscal deficit, be it the capital expenditure, definitely you need to have that awareness with respect to numbers. But more important is the analysis, so that you can do the value addition along with the budget to your GS. So with this, let's start the discussion. Now, let's talk about the basics of the budget. So if we look into the constitutional provisions, we have the Article 112 of the Indian Constitution, which very clearly says that the President shall, in respect of every financial year, cause to be laid before both the House of the Parliament a statement of the estimated receipts and expenditure of the Government of India for that year, in this part referred to as annual financial statement. What is to be noted is that there is no mention of the word budget in the Constitution, right? So we just use it in colloquial terms. So the exact wording which is mentioned in the Constitution is annual finance statement. Now again, what the budget actually incorporates. So it primarily, it is a description of the overall receipts of the government and the kind of expenditure which is borne by the government, right? Now again, it also includes the key economic initiatives which are being taken by the government. Different sectors, be it the infrastructure, be it the agriculture, be it the education, right? It also includes the financial initiatives taken. For example, it can be with respect to the taxation, right? Now, what you need to understand is that the financial year which we count is, it starts from 1st of April and it ends on 31st of March. Now again, till 2017, we had two kinds of budgets which were presented. The very first is the railway budget, and second was the general budget, right? Now, you need to tell me the name of the committee which actually recommended that the budget should be separated, right? It was way back in 1924, right? Again, then we had a particular committee which was formed in the year 2016 under the chairmanship of Bibek Debroy through the Niti Aayog, which recommended the merging of these two budgets. So from 2017, we have a merged budget, which is the Union Budget, which includes the railway also. Now again, the budget is prepared by the Budget Division, which comes under the Department of Economic Affairs in the Ministry of Finance. This is really important because sometimes UPSC has a tendency to ask questions with respect to the kind of department which is publishing and the other things. Again, let's talk about the process of the budget, right? So the very first is that you have the Honorable Finance Minister who basically presents the budget through the budget speech. Then there is a general discussion which takes place in both the House of the Parliament, be it the Lok Sabha or the Raj Sabha. Then finally, the House is adjourned for almost 1 or 2 weeks. And then you have the DRSEs, departmentally related standing committees, which actually scrutinize the demand for grants with respect to different ministries. Now, this particular stage is very important when we talk about the financial accountability of the executive to the parliament, right? So this is very important. After the DRCs give the recommendation, what we have is the detailed discussions on them, and then the voting takes place with respect to the demand for grants. Then also for those ministries where the voting doesn't take place, so they are voted separately. Again, finally, you have the appropriation bill, which is passed, which basically allows the executive to draw a specific amount of money from the Consolidate Fund of India. And then you also have the finance bill, which basically talk about, for example, the taxation aspects, right? So this is the overall process of the budget. Now, let's start today's discussion. I mean, the context, the very context of this year's budget. Now, the finance minister started her budget speech by quoting the very famous Telugu poet Gurajada Apparau's famous statement, where he says that a country is not just its soil, a country is its people, right? So what does it actually imply? It implies the very objective of the government is to secure a welfare state. It also implies that it is the obligation of the government to keep the welfare of the citizens at the center stage of any economic policy initiative, right? So this is very important. You can also use this in your mains, right? Be it essay or be it the GS answers. Now, what the budget has said is that we are going to chart this journey of development with 4 engines of growth, right? What are the 4 engines of development? The first is agriculture. Now understand, agriculture is a sector which basically contributes to almost 18.3% to the overall GDP. But at the same time, what you need to understand is that it contributes a mammoth, almost 43% of the livelihood which is provided by the agriculture in the overall economic activity, right? So again, the contribution of agriculture is way too much. Second is the MSMEs. So what is the second engine of growth, engine of development? It is the MSME. Now MSMEs are known as the lifeblood of the Indian economy, right? Because of their huge role, whether it's about the contribution to the GDP, almost 30%, or be it their contribution in the overall exports, which stands to be almost 45%, right? Next is investments. Investments so as to spur the growth and demand in the country, be it the investment in the assets, capital assets, or be it the investment in social sector, right? So they're really important. Next is exports. So exports are really important when we talk about the export earnings and their contribution to the overall GDP, right? Now, what the budget says is that the kind of fuel which would be required to burn these engines is to ignite these engines is the reforms. We have to take a lot of reforms in different sectors. Then what would be the guiding spirit? It would be inclusivity, what we call as Sabka Vikas, including all sections of the society. Next is what would be the destination, and that would be the Viksit Bharat, right? We'll also study about what are actually the ideals of Viksit Bharat, which are actually given by the Honorable Finance Minister. Now, again, one very important thing which the budget is talking about is that these developmental measures, they should focus upon Gyan, right? So it's a very good acronym. Again, you can use this in the exam. It basically stands for that we should focus upon Garib, that is the poor. Y stands for Yuva, that is a youth, right? A stands for Annadata, that is the farmer. And finally, you have N, which stands for Nari, right? The women. So we have to focus upon the poor, the youth, the farmers, the women, right? So that we can actually have a more inclusive development, right? Now, next aspect is what are the aspirations of Viksit Bharat? First is accelerate growth. Why do we need to accelerate growth? So that basically we can avoid this middle income trap and we can have high per capita incomes along with the equity, right? Second is secure inclusive development. Why we should do this? So as to make sure that every section of the society is an equitable stakeholder in the developmental progress, right? Again, you need to understand that, different reports, be the World Inequality Lab or be it the other reports, they have pointed out towards the high rates of inequality in the country, right? Next is enhance spending power of the India's rising middle class. Very important. See, the share of the middle class is rising. And again, once they'll have money in their hand, their disposable incomes would increase and they would basically consume more or they would save more. And both these things, the consumption as well as savings, they would spur the demand in the economy, they would boost the economy. Next is invigorate the private sector investments. What we are trying to say is make sure that the private sector is also an equal stakeholder in the developmental trajectory, right? Next, we have the uplift household sentiments. Very important, right? So the kind of impression you're giving to the households should be very good. And I personally think that this time Finance Minister has done a very good task. If you talk about the kind of income tax rates, right? So they have been reduced a lot for the middle class, right? So it's a good sign. Now, what are the broad principles of Viksit Bharat? Very important, right? For those of you who are actually appearing for the interview, or even while you're writing an answer, right? What is this idea of Viksit Bharat, right? So again, sometimes what we find ourselves is in a great confusion with respect to how we define the idea of Viksit Bharat. But the finance minister has very clearly elaborated on this part. She says that Viksit Bharat is something which has zero poverty. Now, this is also an aspect of sustainable development goal. She said that it also includes 100% good quality school education, which is also one of the very important pillars or the objectives of the new education policy, right? Next is access to high quality, affordable and comprehensive healthcare. What we are trying to emphasize upon is universal health coverage, which is also an aspect of National Health Policy 2017. Next is 100% skilled labor with meaningful employment. What we are trying to say is we should make our labor force skilled so that we can capitalize upon this demographic dividend which we have. Next is 70% of the women in the economic activities. What we are trying to say again is that we should capitalize upon this half of the total population, which is actually the women, right? So we should make sure that we basically capitalize the economic potential of the half of the population. Next is farmers making our country the food basket of the world through sustainable farming techniques, right? Again, what we need to emphasize upon is the budget has also told that we should focus upon climate resilient agriculture, right? Now, next aspect is that what are the different pillars? The very first is spurring the agriculture growth and building rural prosperity. Now, in this particular aspect, the government has come up with various policy initiatives. The very first is national vision on high yielding seeds. Why do we need high yielding seeds? Is because, we have this climate change and we have the extreme weather events. Now, they are disrupting the overall agriculture landscape. So we need these kind of seeds. Again, if you remember, in the last year's budget, the government emphasized upon introducing 109 high-yielding variety seeds for almost 32 crops. Now, this would primarily include the targeted development and propagation of seeds with high yield, pest resistance and climate resilience. Next aspect is that of enhanced credit through Kisan Credit Card. Very important. Once we are talking about the Kisan Credit Card, the government has said that now we are going to increase the limit of the credit which these farmers can take. Now again, why this is important is because you already know that there is a lot of farm distress in the country. The incidence of the farm indebtedness in the country still stands to be almost around 48%, right? So we have to decrease this farm indebtedness, right? And we have to make sure that the farmers have adequate money with them so that they can actually invest in buying the inputs, right? So facilitate the short-term loans for 7.7 crore farmers, fishermen and dairy farmers with enhanced loan of 5 lakhs. Next is the government plans to come with a new mission, which is Prime Minister Dhan Dhanya Krishi Yojana, right? Now again, what it is trying to focus upon is few districts, those districts which have low productivity in the agriculture, right? So they would provide the necessary inputs and again make sure that those districts are at par with the other districts and there is more equity or there is more balanced development in the agriculture, right? So again, to cover 100 districts and likely to help almost 1.7 crore farmers. Next is mission for cotton productivity. So it is trying to emphasize upon the greater productivity in the cotton, right? Especially we have the black cotton soil areas, right? Where what we call as the regular soil, right? So again, there is going to be a 5-year mission to facilitate the improvements in the productivity and sustainability of the cotton farming. Finally, we have the Makhana board in Bihar, Fox Nut. So we have the famous entrepreneur, Nikhil Kamath, who has also promoted this idea of fox nut, makhana, right? So makhana is something which is a very good source of nutrition. And also what you can understand is that if we invest in a proper processing of the makhana, then a lot of farmers would be benefited, especially in the state of Bihar, which almost, supplies 80 to 90% of overall makhana in the country, right? That is the fox nuts. Right. So this is the overall objective. Again, the emphasis is upon promoting the farmer produce organization so that they have better bargaining capacity, right? So that they can get a fair price for their products. Now, again, yes, very one important aspect which has been highlighted in the budget is the Rural Prosperity and Resilience Program. Now, what is the very objective of this program? See, what it is trying to say is that there is a lot of underemployment in the agriculture, what we call as disguised unemployment. So it is trying to say that we will try to reduce this underemployment in the agriculture and make sure that we have, those youths who are actually in the agriculture, they have better opportunities and we'll try to invest in skills, in technology, we'll invest through the credit, right? So again, it's a very broad sort of a mission which actually tries to address this aspect of disguised unemployment. Now, next aspect is the Atmanirbhar in pulses. We all know that pulses are something which are highly nutritive. They have a very good nutrition content. And again, they're very good for the soil, right? So they promote the soil sustainability, right? Now, the government is trying to focus upon this. Also, what you need to understand is that we have a dependence upon this rice wheat system, the monoculture, right, which has degraded the soil. So there is a need to transition to these pulses. So launch a 6-year mission with special focus on tur, urad, masoor, emphasizing the development and commercial availability of the climate resilient seeds, enhancing the protein content, increasing the productivity, improving the post-harvest storage management, and assuring the remunerative prices to the farmers. So that, see, again, if you will not provide them the incentive, why they're going to switch from this rice wheat to the pulses? So you have to give them adequate incentives. So again, what are the benefits of the climate resilient farm? The very first is environmental sustainability. The second is improved food security. And the third is enhanced profitability of the farmers. Now, next aspect, which is very important, is India Post as a catalyst for rural economy. How you can link India Post with that of the rural economy? See, understand, the reach of India Post is very good in the country. It has its offices in the even remotest parts of the country. So we should capitalize upon the reach of India Post in order to make sure that we have a more prosperous rural economy, right? So rural community hubs would be formed through the India Post. Then we have institutional account services, be it the direct benefit transfer, the cash out and EMI pickups, then credit services to micro enterprises, insurance, assisted digital services. See, again, the very objective is, the summation is that we are using India Post so as to enhance the overall extension services to the farmers so that their productivity can increase, right? Because rural economy is primarily driven by the agriculture. Second is give them adequate credit so that they can also develop their own self-employment opportunities, right? Give them adequate credit. So these are some of the things which the budget is talking about. Next aspect is that we have to support the micro, small and medium enterprises and further make in India, right? So the very first is credit cards for micro enterprises. What the budget is saying is that we will make a provision that we have different MSMEs. So they would be given the credit cards with a limit of 5 lakhs for the micro enterprises registered on Udyam portal. In the first year, 10 lakhs such card will be issued. Now, how is this credit card going to help these micro enterprises? See, understand. When we talk about these micro enterprises, go into the soul of the very reason why the government has come up with this particular act. These micro enterprises require working capital, right? But they don't have the adequate money with them. But if they'll have the credit card, they'll have the adequate working capital, and that would boost their productivity, the overall production, right? And therefore, it would make the whole system very competitive. Next is scheme for the first time entrepreneurs. See, what we are trying to say is that for the 5 lakh first time entrepreneurs, including women, scheduled castes, scheduled tribes, a new scheme to be launched, provide term loans to up to 2 crore during the next 5 years. We have a similar scheme, Stand Up India, right, which focuses upon these vulnerable sections of the society. So we are trying to promote, we are trying to make the whole startup ecosystem more equitable, more inclusive. That's the reason the government has come up with this. Next is National Manufacturing Mission. See, again, what you need to understand is that manufacturing is something where we have always lagged. As of now, it shares in the GDP, it's almost around 17%. And we have been trying to increase to 25%, and the target is to do it by 2030. But again, that needs a lot of investments, right? So this particular mission is going to help with that. So ease and cost of doing business. We have to make sure that the cost of doing business is reduced. Next is future ready workforce for the in-demand jobs. Again, what we're trying to say is that with the integration of the robotics, automation, artificial intelligence in the supply chain, there's going to be a challenge, right, for the labor. So we need to make sure that the kind of labor force we have, it is skilled in these aspects. Next is vibrant and dynamic MSMEs, because MSMEs are the ones which play the very important role in the manufacturing. Next is availability of technology. As I said, machine learning, data analytics, artificial intelligence, quality products, very important. If you want that our product should compete with that of the Western countries, you should focus upon the quality, right? Next is clean tech manufacturing for the climate friendly development. What we are trying to say is, when we talk about the clean tech manufacturing, let's say the production and development of solar cells and modules, let's say the production and development of the battery storage systems. So this is what is focused upon. Next aspect is focus upon the footwear and the leather sectors. Understand, the leather sector in the country is highly labor intensive. So we need to incentivize it, right? So we are giving them through a particular scheme. We are trying to make sure that it facilitates the employment for almost 2.2 million people, that is 22 lakh people, and generate a turnover of almost 4 lakh crore. Now, can you tell me the leather capital of the country, right? So let me know in the comment section. Measures for the toy sector, right? So again, the toy sector is something which we should capitalize upon, right? We are still dependent upon the Chinese imports. So again, we have some of the clusters in the country, be it Channapatna in Karnataka, or be it Kondapalli in Andhra Pradesh, or be it Banaras in the Uttar Pradesh. So we should focus upon these industrial clusters so that we can basically focus upon these manufacturing these toys, and even for the domestic consumption and also for exporting, right? So and a manufacturing ecosystem that will create high quality, unique, innovative and sustainable toys in the country. Support for the food processing, very, very, very important. Again, why? Because according to a report by Niti Aayog, what it says is that India has an annual wastage of around 1 lakh crore. There's a food wastage, and it amounts to almost 1 lakh crore, right? Now, again, why we have food wastage? Because we don't have proper supply chains. We don't have adequate cold storage facilities. And these items are perishable in nature, right? So we have to focus upon making a robust supply chain for the food processing, right? So therefore, we have to focus upon the food processing aspect. So we have to establish the National Institute of Food Technology in Bihar, enhance income for the farmers, skilling, entrepreneurship, and employment opportunity for the youth. So again, these are the general measures which the budget has talked about. Next is significant enhancement of the credit availability with the guarantee cover. What do you mean by guarantee cover? Just understand that. Let's say you have a particular bank who has given money to a particular MSME, right? A particular enterprise, and that enterprise fails to repay the money. So again, who would basically bear the consequences or the losses which the bank has suffered? So what we are doing is we are making a fund which would act as a cushion for this lender, right? So that is what we call as the credit guarantee, right? So again, what you need to understand is that the micro small enterprises, the current credit cover was up to 5 crore rupees. Now this has been doubled to almost 10 crores. Similarly, for startups, it has been doubled to 20 crores. Again, one very important category which has been added is exporter MSMEs for term loans up to 20 crores. Now this is to provide the adequate cushion to the lenders who are actually giving money to these enterprises. Now next is revision in the classification criteria for micro, small and medium enterprises. This is very important. See, as of now, we have a certain threshold within which we defined whether a particular enterprise is a micro enterprise or a small enterprise or a medium enterprise. So the current classification, it is based on the investment as well as the turnover. It says that if you have a particular enterprise where the investment is less than 1 crore, and if the turnover is basically less than 5 crores, it would be deemed as micro. Similarly, you have for small and medium enterprise. What the government is trying to do is it is trying to enhance this limit, right? So it is increasing the investment limit almost 2.5 times, right? So it is increasing to 2.5 crores for small enterprises, almost 25 crores for medium enterprises to 125 crores. Next, it is increasing the turnover by two times. So it is increasing from 5 to 10 for the micro enterprises, 10 crores, 50 to 100 crores for the small enterprises, and 250 to 500 crores for these medium enterprises. Now, again, you would ask, what is the benefit? If you will have enhanced limits, you will have more number of participants joining, and legally they will be as the micro, small and medium enterprises. They would be deemed as MSMEs. So they would be eligible for more benefits which the government is providing, be it in terms of the credit benefit, the credit support, be it in terms of the technological upgradation, be in terms of the social security benefits. So they would be eligible for that, and therefore the government is planning to come up with this. Now, next aspect is investing. Next pillar is investing in people, economy and innovation. Very important. Government is actually planning to come up with this Saksham Anganwadi and Poshan 2.0. Now, this is basically an aspect of early childhood care and education, where we are also focusing upon the nutritional security of these children and infants, right? Next is expansion of the capacity of the Indian Institute of Technologies. Now, why this is important is, if you want to have a workforce which is ready for the 21st century challenges, ready for the Industrial Revolution 4.0, you need to expand the capacity of these technical institutions, be it the IITs or the NITs. So government is working upon that. Daycare cancer centers in all district hospitals. We have the number of cancer cases in the country which is rising. So therefore it calls for adequate healthcare preparedness. So the government is saying that we are going to basically have these daycare centers in the district hospitals. So the patients need not to travel to the tertiary centers which are primarily in the metropolitan cities, right? Next is Bharatiya Bhasha Pustak Scheme. Provide digital form of Indian languages books for school and higher education. Vernacular based education, right? Education based on the mother tongue, very important. National Centers for Excellence for Skilling to be set up with a global expertise and partnership. Why? Because we have to make sure that we have a kind of an ecosystem, a skilling ecosystem, where people have adequate skills, especially with respect to the emerging technologies, be it the machine learning, be it the deep AI, right? Whatever. Next is the Atal Tinkering Labs. Now, Again, the very objective of these Atal Tinkering Labs is to infuse that spirit of innovation and inquiry among the school children, right? So we are trying to emphasize, we're trying to expand these Atal Tinkering Labs, 50,000 labs to be set up in the government schools in the next 5 years. Next is Center of Excellence in the Artificial Intelligence. Same thing. You are actually witnessing the infusion of artificial intelligence in almost everything, right? Be it the content, be it the generative AI platforms, the ChatGPT, Gemini, or be it in the manufacturing sector, be it in the autonomous driving vehicles, or be it your Netflix, Amazon. So we have to focus upon artificial intelligence, make it as a part of curriculum in the education. Next is broadband connectivity to be provided to all government senior secondary schools and primary health centers. Why? Because government is trying to make sure that there is adequate facility of teleconsultation. You have e-Sanjeevani, right? Or you have tele-education. So the government wants that we should capitalize upon the digital connectivity to provide these services even in the remotest part of the country. Next is expansion of medical education. The government has done that. Expansion of the seats, right? So that we have adequate number of healthcare professionals. So again, those of you who are living in the urban areas, you can easily find a doctors, but just understand the condition. You have, isolated tribal areas or the remote corners where there is no facility of doctors. So we need to have adequate healthcare professionals, with the goal of adding 75,000 seats in the next 5 years. PM Swanidhi, Street Vendor Atmanirbhar Nidhi. Again, to make sure that these street vendors have adequate credit with them. The government is trying to make sure that they should be given UPI linked credit cards. Again, understand, MSMEs are also being given credit cards. Kisan credit card limit has been extended. Now these Swanidhi, the street vendors, the very objective is that they have the adequate working capital with them, right? Capacity building support. Why we need to give them capacity building? So that they have adequate skills. They can use that money for buying the inputs and they can have their own livelihood options. Next is welfare of online platform workers. Very good initiative. We have these gig workers, be it for the Swiggy or the Amazon, right? What we call as delivery partners. So the government is saying that now we are going to include you in the PM Jan Arogya Yojana. So you'll be provided the healthcare benefits, right? Those who are registered on the eShram portal, right? So these are some of the initiatives. Investing in people again. So next step which the government is trying to say is support the states for the infrastructure. Very important. Now, understand that the kind of expenditure, see, we have the expenditure which is made by the central government and we have the expenditure made by the state governments. If you add the cumulative expenditure made by the states in the country, that is way higher than that of the central government, right? So they need to have adequate resources. Ultimately, it is the state government which have to do the development at the ground level, right? So we should focus upon giving them adequate money. With an outlay of 1.5 lakh crore, 50-year interest-free loans to the states for capital expenditure. Only for the capital expenditure, be it for creating long-term assets, highways, roads, power transmission lines, right? Next is Jal Jeevan Mission. The very objective is to provide a functional household tap water connection, FHTCs in the rural areas, right? So achieve 100% coverage, the machine extended till 2028 with an enhanced total outlay. Next is power sector reforms. You must have heard about aggregate technical and commercial losses, ATC. Right? So we have these DISCOMs, distribution companies, power distribution companies. They are suffering huge losses. So again, for years, the government has been coming up with different policy initiatives. Now what it has said is incentivize the distribution reforms and augmentation of the intrastate transmission. There has to be proper transmission, robust transmission of the power so that there is less losses, right? Additional borrowing to 0.5% of the gross state domestic product to states contingent on these reforms. If they would make reforms, they would be given this basically window. Next is asset monetization plan for 25-30. Government came up with asset monetization in 2021, right? And it basically found those, first of all, what is asset monetization? So it is primarily a way. You have certain assets which are idle, right? So to unlock the economic value of those underutilized assets of the government, we have the asset monetization, right? So from 2021 till 25, the government identified these assets to the tune of almost 6 lakh crores. Now it is saying that we are going to have the second version, and again to plug back the capital of almost 10 lakh crore in the new projects. Next is Urban Challenge Fund. Urban Challenge Fund to basically spur the spirit of competition among different cities. So they're going to come with 1 lakh crore to implement the proposal for cities as growth hubs, creative redevelopment of cities, and water and sanitation. Again, the very objective is to make these cities more smart, what we call a smart cities mission, right? We already had that. So we are trying to give them this opportunity. Now they have to basically exploit different mechanism, be it the corporate bonds, be it the municipal bonds, so as to have their own resources, right? So this is the mechanism. Next is Maritime Development Fund. We already had the Sagarmala, right, which is a port-oriented development strategy. So we are also specifying that we need to focus upon the maritime developmental aspect with the corpus of almost 25,000 crores for a long-term financing with 49% contribution by the government. Next, what it means is that there would be adequate private participation also, right? So they are equal stakeholders. You just studied before. Nuclear energy mission for Viksit Bharat. Definitely, we have the nationally determined contributions goal, right? We have the Panchamrit goals. We are focusing upon the renewable energy, be it the solar or the wind power. But again, these are the kind of sources which are not always available. Let's say there is, there are clouds. So you won't be able to have these solar energy, right? Or let's say there is no wind which is blowing. So the wind energy would not be there, right? So we need to have a kind of source which is continuous. And therefore, we are also looking forward to the nuclear energy, right? So the government is saying that we are going to start the private participation in the nuclear energy, and we are going to amend some of the very important laws. Till now, the nuclear sector was a strategic one where the private participation was not allowed. Now they're saying that we will amend the Atomic Energy Act and the Civil Liability for the Nuclear Damage Act. So make sure that there is active partnership with the private sector and we have adequate investments in the nuclear sector, primarily for the development of SMRs, small modular reactors, right? We'll study about it. Next is Udan, Ude Desh Ka Aam Nagrik. Now again, the very objective is to enhance the connectivity to make sure that the middle class, especially the lower middle class, it also has the adequate opportunity to fly and again boost to the air connectivity by providing low air fares, right? Future needs of Bihar. Again, we have a coalition politics, coalition government. So definitely this was something which is natural. And again, we have focused upon Bihar because it has a lot of potential, right? So greenfield airports are going to be constructed, financial support for the Western Koshi Canal, that is extension, renovation and modernization projects. Next is Swami Fund 2. Now this primarily emphasizes the single window for affordable and mid-income housing, right? So again, this is trying to focus upon the expeditious completion of 1 lakh dwelling units through blended finance. The focus of the government is on the middle class, right? And that is the reason it has come up with these initiatives. Again, we have another sector, very important, what we call a sunrise sector, tourism, where the government has paid attention. Top 50 tourist destinations to be developed in partnership with states, right? Introducing streamlined e-visa facility, right? Intensive skill development programs for our youths, be it the guides, be it the other people. Performance-linked incentives to the states. Mudra loans for homestays, very important. So these homestays can definitely invest the money and then come up with better places to stay, right? Ease of travel and connectivity to tourist destinations. A sector-specific initiative which is with respect to the tourism. Next aspect is PM Research Fellow. But before that, research, development and innovation. See, again, what the budget is saying is that we are going to allocate 20,000 crore to implement the private sector driven research, development and innovation initiative. Why this is important is because the gross expenditure on research and development, what we call as GERD in the country, is still very less, almost 0.6% of the GDP. And this number, the gross research, the expenditure on the research and development for countries like China, it's almost 2.4% of the GDP. So this is quite high in the countries like China, right? Let's not talk about the developed countries. So we have to increase the investment in the R&D. For that, the government is coming up with this. Then we have PM Research Fellowship. Again, the same thing, to provide opportunities for the young, bright minds to invest in the research, right? To provide 10,000 fellowships for the technological research in the Indian Institute of Technology and Indian Institute of Science. Gene Bank for crop germplasm. Now, why we are focusing upon this is to enhance the nutritional security, to come up with those seeds which are high yielding, right? And which are climate resilient, right? So we are focusing upon the germplasm bank. Next is Gyan Bharata mission, documentation and conservation of our manuscript heritage to cover more than 1 crore manuscripts. Next is National Geospatial Mission. Now, the very objective of this is to make sure that we have the foundational geospatial infrastructure. And again, that data is going to be used for different schemes. You must know that we have PM Gati Shakti, which tries to break down the silos. So we have different departments taking their own initiatives. Now we have PM Gati Shakti, which would enhance more collaboration among different departments. And that really requires a geospatial knowledge, right? So again, facilitation of the modernization of land records. Why? We have one very important scheme, and that is Swamitva. That is the upgradation of the land records, right? Village land records. Urban planning and design of infrastructure projects. So we are going to use this geospatial information in different avenues, be it the modernization, be it the Swamitva scheme, right? Upgradation of the land records, or be it the Gati Shakti for the implementation of projects. Next aspect is promotion of exports. So we are going to come with export promotion mission. Export is something which is really important for the overall enhancement of the GDP of the country and to make it more competitive, right? We have countries like China who have capitalized upon this. They have become export-oriented countries. But we are not able to utilize that. We are not able to capitalize upon this aspect. So therefore, we have to focus upon making sure that our industries are also more competitive with sectoral and ministerial targets to facilitate easy access to export credits, cross-border factoring support, and support to MSMEs to tackle non-tariff measures in the overseas market. Next is Bharat Trade Net. Now, this is going to be a digital public infrastructure where the focus would be to facilitate the international trade with a unified platform for trade documentation and financing solution, support for integration with global supply chains. We have also come up with a new initiative, if you know, that supply chain resilience initiative, right? So we are focusing upon the global supply chain, and for that, this Bharat Trade Net is going to be very important. National framework for global capability centers. Now they are going to be the centers which would basically enhance the competitiveness in the tier 2 cities. Very important. Then we have warehousing facility for air cargo to facilitate upgradation of infrastructure and warehousing for air cargo, including high value perishable horticulture produce. To make a robust supply chain, to reduce the food waste, we are coming up with these warehouses. Next is the financial sector reforms and development. The very first is Grameen Credit Score Framework to serve the credit needs of the self-help group members and people in rural areas. What we are trying to say is that we need to have a proper credit framework. We have these self-help groups, very famous and very successful ones, be the Kudumbushri in Kerala. So they can have the adequate resources and then adequate credit, and they can then give it to the self-help group members, and then they can have their own livelihood options. So we should have a credit score for these self-help groups. The National Bank for Financing the Infrastructure and Development to set up a partial credit enhancement facility for corporate bonds for infrastructure. This NABFID is primarily a development financial institution. And the very objective, what it is trying to do is to ensure that there is the adequate credit, and that can come up with the corporate bonds. Revamp the central KYC registry to be rolled out in 25. Rationalization of the requirements and procedures for speedy approvals of company mergers. We should make sure that the complex regulatory procedure is done away with, and there has to be smooth facilitation process even for the mergers of the company. FDI limit for the insurance sector will be raised from 74% to 100%. Next is what are the tax reforms which the budget has talked about. Changes in the direct taxes and propose to introduce the new income tax bill. Then there are regulatory reforms, very important. Light touch regulatory framework. The word is light touch regulatory framework, which is not something which acts as a burden for the enterprises. Based on the principles and trust to unleash productivity and employment, there would be the establishment of high-level committee for the regulatory reforms, investment friendliness index of states, so that would also serve as a competition among different states. Financial Stability Development Council mechanism to evaluate the impact of the current financial regulations and subsidiary instructions, along with the framework to enhance their responsiveness and development of the financial sector. Tell me who heads the FSDC. Jan Vishwas Bill 2.0. Very important, to decriminalize more than 100 provisions in the various laws. So these are kind of regulatory laws made to make sure that there is more productivity in the overall manufacturing and other industrial services. Next is rationalization of custom tariff structure for industrial goods. Now this is with respect to the indirect tax proposals. The budget is saying that we are going to remove the 7 tariff rates, apply not more than 1 cess or surcharge. Now the kind of income which the government gets through the cess and surcharge, it goes to the central government. So what they're saying is that we have different cess and surcharge. For cess, for example, if education cess, road cess, we are going to make sure that we rationalize the system of cess and surcharge. Apply equivalent cess to maintain effective duty incidence on most of the items and lower cess on certain items. Again, to make sure the products are more competitive. Next, we have the sector specific proposals. For example, Make in India exemption to open cell for LED, LCD, TV, loom textiles, capital goods for lithium ion battery, for mobile phones, for electric vehicles. The very objective is why the government is providing the exemption is to make sure that we have more number of production, right? And ultimately the cost would come down, and then we'll have domestic manufacturing, more of domestic manufacturing, economies of scale, right? We'll not be dependent upon the imports. Promotion of maintenance, repair and overhaul, exemption for 10 years for goods for ship building, right? So we have one very important place in India which is known for ship repair. Just tell me which place is that. Ship for breaking, extension of time limits for export of railway goods imported for repairs, export promotion, duty-free imports for the handicrafts and leather sectors, trade facilitation, time limit fixed for finalization of provisional assessment, new provision for voluntary declaration. Again, the very objective is to promote the trade. So these are sector specific proposals. Next, we have the addition of 36 life-saving drugs, medicines in the exempted list. The objective is to make sure that there is improved access to life-saving medicines. We have critical illnesses. So for those particular illnesses, there would be exemption of these taxes, right? 6 medicines in the 5% duty list, 37 medicines and 13 new patient assistance programs in the exempt list. What I'm trying to say is you need not to memorize these numbers. You can have a general idea that the government has come up with this proposal to reduce or to exempt these medicines from any kind of taxes or fees, right? So this is the overall objective. Then we have direct tax. Very good news. So earlier we had the limit of 7 lakhs, right? But now that limit has been increased to 12 lakhs. Again, we have a standard deduction of 75,000. So those people who are earning even 12 lakh 75,000 per year annually, they would not be subject to the income tax. Then we have a change in the tax slab. Now, this tax slab has been rationalized considering the importance of the middle income groups in the country, what we called as the sentiment, right? That is uplifting the household sentiments. Now, if you just look at this particular tax slab, now this is the existing tax slab and this is the proposed one. Let's say we have a particular person who is earning 16 lakhs per annum, right? So for the income from 15 to 16 lakhs, that is 1 lakh. This person was actually, he had to pay almost 30% of this 1 lakh, that is 30,000 as tax. But according to the proposed one, he will have to pay is from 12 to 16, just 15%, right? So again, what we're trying to say is that the government is focusing upon the middle income groups and making sure that they have adequate disposable income with them, right? So that they can consume, they can spend in the consumption, they can also save, right? So that would give a boost to the overall economy. Next, we have the rationalization of TDS and TCS. Now again, this is tax deduction at source, which is basically the payee withholding a particular amount, and the other is tax collection at source, where you have the particular seller who withholds a particular amount. We are actually rationalizing the whole process, encouraging the voluntary compliance, then reducing the compliance burden, making sure that we have a particular scheme for determining the arm's length price. That is where the buyer and the seller, they transact and reach to a price where there is no conflict of interest which is involved. Expansion of the scope of the safe harbor rules to reduce the litigation and provide certainty. Why this is important? So these rules basically make sure that it avoids the unnecessary litigations, make sure there is certainty in the taxation system. Then you have employment and investment, tax certainty for electronics manufacturing schemes, tonnage tax for inland vehicles. Then we have other specific schemes which are focusing upon the sectoral enhancement, the sectoral productivity. Now, this is important, can be asked in the prelims. Where does the rupee comes from? The primary source, the first is the borrowings and other liabilities. Then you should know it is the income tax. Then it is the GST, the goods and services tax, and other taxes. What the UPSC might ask is the kind of arrangement in a particular fashion. That is, which is the source which contributes the most, right? So then you can have the corporation tax, then you can have the non-tax receipts. Coming to the expenditure part, where the money goes, we have the first as the state's share of taxes and duties. This is very important. Earlier, what used to happen was that primarily the interest payments contributed to most of the expenditure. But now you have the share of the states, which is going up, and this is really a good thing. Second, you have the interest payments, and third, you have central sector schemes, where the center is actually bearing the whole of the expenditure, excluding the capital outlay on defense and subsidy. Next is the macroeconomic indicators, very important. Question can be possibly asked. So when we talk about the receipts and expenditure, we break down into two subheads, that is the revenue and the capital. So when we talk about the revenue receipts, they are of recurring nature, right? So for example, it can be the taxes, right? If we talk about the revenue expenditure, they're also of recurring nature. For example, the incomes paid to the government employees, the pensions paid. When we talk about the capital receipts, they are of non-recurring nature, right? And they're in terms of either the liability or in terms of the divestment, right? So that is one aspect. Then we talk about the expenditure, the capital expenditure. It is in terms of investing in the assets, right? Now, if you look at the estimates for the year 25-26, it says that it is almost 34 lakhs crore for the revenue receipts. Then it is almost 16.44 lakh crore for the capital receipts. If you talk about the revenue expenditure, it is going to be almost 39.44 lakh crores. That is in terms of the revenue expenditure. And then when we talk about the capital expenditure, it's going to be 11.21 lakh crores. No need to revise, just memorize these numbers, but again, have a fair good idea. The overall expenditure, it is almost to the tune of 50.5 lakh crore. That is if you add the capital expenditure and the revenue expenditure. What is effective capital expenditure? See, again, over here, the capital expenditure is 11.21, but here it is 15.5 because this also includes the grant and aids which are given to the states. So this includes the grant and aids. Just remember. Next, if we talk about this aspect, that is the fiscal deficit, revenue deficit, effective revenue deficit, and the primary deficit. This is important. See, last year, the estimate said that we would have almost 4.9% of the GDP as fiscal deficit, according to the estimates which were provided last year, in last year budget. But now what we are seeing is in the revised ones, we are seeing that this number has come down to 4.8 from 4.9. And from last year's 4.5 number, it has come to 4.4 for the 25-26 period. So this is something which is really good. The government is focusing upon the fiscal consolidation aspect. Now, fiscal deficit, what it implies? See, again, it reflects the kind of borrowing which is done by the government to compensate for the excess expenditure. Then you have the revenue deficits, which is actually the difference between the kind of revenue receipts and the revenue expenditure. Then we have primary deficit. If you subtract the interest payments from the fiscal deficit, you will get the primary deficit. Then you have got the effective revenue deficit. That is, if you deduct the grants and aid from the revenue deficit, you will get the effective revenue deficit. You can have a glance at these definitions, which are actually provided in the budget itself. So you can have a just look. Again, understand that there has been a downward trajectory. If there's a question with respect to the trends, always say that there has been a downward trajectory. Next aspect is total transfer to the states and UTs. This is important. And that's the reason I have put it here. The kind of transfers which are being made to the states and UTs, they are increasing. Just see that it was 17.06 lakh crores for the period 21-22. And now this is jumped to 25.6 lakh crores. So it's a quite good jump. And this is a good news because as I said, most of the expenditure is borne by the state government. So they should have adequate resources. So this is a good picture, right? Finally, you have expenditure for major items. You have defense, right, where almost 4,91,000 is being spent. Then you have got rural development, 2,66,000, home affairs, agriculture, education, health. Again, you need not to, memorize, but again, know that this is the kind of priority list. At least have a picture clear with the first three or the first five. Defense, rural development, home affairs, agriculture, education. Then you have got the other entries such as IT, telecom, energy, commerce, social welfare, scientific department. Just see, for scientific department, it's just 55,000. So therefore, we need to increase the scientific investments. So this is for the budget, right? So we'll have a mains practice question. The question says, the Union Budget 25-26 has introduced several key economic and financial policy changes aimed at stimulating the growth and ensuring the fiscal prudence with the emphasis on Sabka Vikas. Analyze. Do write a particular answer in this question. So coming to the simplified section, we have the first group of articles which talks about the social sector. I have taken these articles from the Indian Express. Very simple language. Again, the very objective of these simplifying the news for you is to tell you that we have these certain schemes, this much amount is allocated. You don't need to memorize the kind of amount which is allocated. But yes, those schemes become really important for the exam. And there can be a question with respect to the objective of those schemes, the kind of ministries they're associated with, right? So let's start this. So the total outlay of the health in this year's budget has increased by almost 9,000 crore with the investment going in some of the very important schemes, be it the Ayushman Bharat or, for example, the allocation for the AIIMS Delhi. The total outlay for the Union Health Ministry has increased to almost 95,000 crore. The Ayushman Bharat coverage is going to cover 1 crore gig workers. Very important because of the kind of work environment they're involved in, the hardships they face. So they should be given the social security in terms of the health, right? Gig workers are those who are undertake short-term or project-based jobs employed often by online platforms such as Swiggy or Amazon, right? Again, you need to understand that last year we had this particular coverage which was expanded by including the people over the age of 70 years, irrespective of their economic status. These gig workers, they work under stressful conditions and are quite extreme under quite extreme weather conditions. Next aspect is the increase in the number of medical seats. We are going to increase that. We've already done in the first part. Another 10,000 medical seats would be added over the next year, gearing towards the goal of increasing the total number of seats by 75,000 over the next 5 years. There has been massive jump in the number of medical seats over the last decade. The number of MBBS seats has increased from almost 51,000 to 1,12,000. That is from 2014 in 2024. In 10 years, there has been more than double jump, right? Understand, can be important. So because generally in answers, we almost type or write the issues which are there, right? We never emphasize upon the good things also. So sometimes you have to support the initiative of the government, and this is a very good example. Colleges have been grappling with severe, now this is the issue which is the colleges are facing, grappling with severe staff shortage. The geographical distribution of medical seats has also been skewed, with some places like Karnataka and Puducherry having more than the required share. So we need to emphasize, we need to make sure that there is equitable distribution of these medical seats all over the country, right? Budget also saw an increase of 1,000 crore allocation under the PM Ayushman Bharat Health Infrastructure Mission, so as to make sure that the whole infrastructure with respect to the health care in the country is made more robust, increasing to 4,200 crores. This strengthens the health infrastructure at all levels: construction of health and wellness centers, diagnostic laboratories, critical care blocks. The budget for AIIMS Delhi has been increased to 5,200 crores. The Finance Minister has announced the establishment of daycare centers for the cancer treatment. Again, the very objective is to make the treatment of cancers more affordable and available, right? So that the patient need not to come to the tertiary centers in metropolitan cities. 36 life-saving drugs for cancer, rare disease, and chronic illnesses will be exempted from the custom duty. 6 others would be charged a reduced duty of 5%. These cancer daycare centers typically provide chemotherapy, administer essential medications, perform minor procedures such as biopsies, and manage complications. See again, why the government has come up with this particular aspect is because of the increased prevalence of non-communicable disease. As the article itself says, that almost 1 in 9 person is likely to develop some sort of cancer, right? So this is a very serious situation. So the most common cancers among the men are oral cavity, lung and esophageal cancer. Then you have got breast, cervical and ovarian cancer, which are most prevalent among the women. India has a network of almost 759 district hospitals. This is important. This is a kind of data which is important. So that this gives you a direct number that we have this much amount of this many numbers of district hospitals that serve as crucial access points for tertiary healthcare at the district level, particularly beneficial for the rural people who no longer need to travel to large cities as the cost would increase. Then specific challenges are involved. Many district hospitals currently do not offer the biopsy services. There are some medical colleges in the country that do not provide any cancer treatment, right? So the condition with respect to the kind of facilities which are there in the public hospital is still not very good, right? In some places, in fact, it is quite abysmal. Beyond infrastructure limitations, there may also be challenges related to the patient trust and demand. Next aspect is with respect to the tribal affairs. So when we talk about the kind of data which is provided, it says increased budget allocation for the Ministry of Tribal Affairs by 45.79%. Huge increase in the allocation. More funds to bridge the infrastructure gap in tribal dominated areas. The union budget has allocated almost 14,900 crores for the Ministry of Tribal Affairs. 3 crucial initiatives, very important. The first is Eklavya Model Residential School. Then second is Pradhan Mantri Janjati Adivasi Nyay Mahabhiyan, PM Janman, what we call as. Then we have got Dharti Aba Janjati Gram Utkarsh Abhiyan, that is DAJUGA, right? I'm sorry for the pronunciation, it says DAJGUA, right? Now, the enhancement, the allocation has been increased for this. The EMRS, the Eklavya Model Residential School, launched in 2018. This gives you the objective, important. The objective of the program is to set up residential schools for the students from the ST community with an aim to provide them quality education. Then you have the kind of target associated with this particular school. So 728 Eklavya Model Residential School, functional by March 2026 for 3.5 lakh tribal students. Then you've got Dharti Aba Janjati Gram Utkarsh Abhiyan scheme, targeted towards saturation coverage. What do we mean by saturation coverage? To make sure there is 100% coverage, no one is left behind, of government schemes in the health, infrastructure, education and livelihood. Its allocation has been quadrupled to almost 2,000 crore. Then the PM launched this particular scheme in Jharkhand, Hazaribagh, with an outlay of almost 79,000 crore. Then next scheme is PM Janjati Adivasi Nyaya Mahabhiyan, aim to improve the socio-economic vulnerability of the PVTGs, particularly vulnerable tribal groups. So understand, PM Janman is for PVTGs. And the allocation has been increased to almost 300 crores. Next is that the finance minister has said to announce a new scheme would be launched for 5 lakh women entrepreneurs, SCs and STs, right? For the first, as they are the first time entrepreneurs, to give them adequate credit. This will provide them the loans up to 2 crores during the next 5 years. And it would be based on the Stand Up India mission, which we have already discussed before. Online capacity building for entrepreneurship and managerial skills would also be provided. The Department of Empowerment of Person with Disability, the budgetary allocation has been hiked by almost 9.22%, right? Now, this is good, a good infographic which says that the beneficiaries of the PM Ujjwala Yojana, they are increasing. So they are actually substituting the biomass-based fuel to that of the LPG-based fuel. Now this is good for 2 reasons. First, it would make sure that the health effects are minimized, right? Because of the smoke, they used to have a lot of health issues. And second, it would make sure that they don't have to travel long distances, right? So the drudgery, the kind of efforts which they have to put would reduce, and they would be more in a position to focus upon the other activities, including the education. Then it is a description of Ayushman Bharat scheme with respect to the kind of number of cards issued. So we have the Uttar Pradesh, the state of Uttar Pradesh, which has maximum number of cards. Then we've got Madhya Pradesh, Bihar, Maharashtra, Gujarat, right? So you can have a look over there. Next aspect is with respect to the increase in the number of seats in the Indian Institute of Technologies, and as also we studied the medical colleges, right? The total number of students across 23 IITs had increased from 65,000 to 1.35 lakh over the past 10 years. So if you have to write something good about the government initiatives, please do write it. In the last 10 years, you have just seen it has almost more than doubled the number of students in the IITs. The budget also makes a provision for 10,000 fellowships over the next 5 years at IITs and Indian Institute of Science. Under the allocation, we've done that, PM Research Fellowship Scheme. Now, the total allocation for education this year is 1.28 lakh crore, a number which you can cite in your answers. The higher education sector has seen a 5% increase. Then the total amount in numeric terms at almost 50,000 crores. School education saw 8% increase. The AICTE, All India Council for Technical Education, the regulatory body for, let's say, the technical education, the management education, the pharmacy, the regulatory body for technical education saw its allocation halved from 400 crores to 200 crores. Again, our officer has said that this is a regulatory body and this is meant to set standards. It's not a funding agency. Then you have got Pradhan Mantri Innovative Learning Program, a scheme to provide mentorship to talented students, has seen increase in the allocation. PM Shri, Pradhan Mantri School for Rising India. Now, this has seen an increase of 24% in the allocation this year. Then you've got Samagra Shiksha. This has the comprehensive aspect of the primary education as well as the secondary as well as the senior secondary education. Has seen a recorded 10% rise. 50,000 adult tinkering labs. So you've already seen that this is going to increase the kind of innovative spirits, the kind of inquiry, the spirit of inquiry among the students in the school. So this is with respect to the social sector. Let's go to the other sector. Coming to the next sector, it is with respect to the infrastructure. So the very first article which is there in the Indian Express, it talks about the nuclear aspect. So we are going to focus upon the small modular reactors, trying to enhance their number. And also we will make the participation of the private sector more in the nuclear energy sector, right? So let's go through this article. India is set to expand its nuclear energy sector, and it is going to set up almost 20,000 crore mission to develop the small modular reactors. And also, it is trying to operationalize, have a target of at least 5 reactors in the next 8 years, right? And it would also amend the Atomic Energy Act, civil liability for nuclear damage, to make sure that there is adequate participation of the private sector. We have already gone through that in the first part. Now, again, the nuclear energy mission at 20,000 crore would focus upon the research and development of small modular reactors. This information is very important. I'll read it for you and I'll make sure that there can be a question with respect to this SMRs in the prelims. Very important. For SMRs, and promise that at least 5 such indigenously developed SMRs would be operationalized by 2033. What are these SMRs? They, as a name suggests, they are small nuclear reactors that typically generate a sort of energy up to 300 megawatt of electricity. Conventional reactors, they generally have the capacity to actually generate more than 500 megawatt of electricity. But as the name says, SMRs, they produce less. Now, why they are important is because they have lower costs of manufacturing. They're easy to assemble, right? They're relatively simpler and modular design, enabling their components to be assembled in a factory instead of being constructed on sites. So they have lower cost, flexible deployment, and this has made SMRs as much preferable option than the full-size atomic reactors. Now, these SMRs are under the developmental phase and they're still not commercially deployed. What you need to understand is that as of now, we have a couple of experimental SMRs which are operational. Several of these reactors are being constructed in different countries, be it US, China, Russia. Indigenous development of SMRs, and they would be known as Bharat SMRs, Bharat Small Modular Reactors. Next aspect is India's green energy transition would require at least 100 gigawatt of nuclear energy by 2047. Important data, and it is a very good analysis. Now, this basically tries to tell you that if India wants to capitalize upon the nuclear energy, how it can do so and at what pace it would have to do so, right? So, India's installed nuclear energy capacity is almost 7,480 megawatts, comprising 23 reactors. So, it corresponds to almost 7.4 gigawatts, right? The government plans to triple this capacity to 28,022 gigawatts by 31-32. Unlike renewables like solar or wind, the nuclear energy offers reliable source, again because of we don't have the kind of interruptions which are there in the solar and the wind associated with the nuclear energy. This is also gaining traction as technology companies are searching for stable power supply for the surging demand of machine learning applications. We already discussed this before, that because of the AI, there is more deployment of the data centers, and these data centers consume a lot of energy. And therefore, we need to have the provision, the continuous provision of the electricity. And for that, these nuclear power plants are gaining traction, particularly in countries like the US. Reaching the 100 gigawatt target means a five-fold expansion in the 15 years between 32 and 47. Addition of about 5 to 6 gigawatt of nuclear energy every year. We'll have to do that. This cannot happen without the involvement of the private sector, and therefore we'll have to need the amendment in these two particular acts. Important information. So far, these nuclear plants have been owned and operated by the Nuclear Energy Power Corporation of India, right? And its fully owned subsidiary Bharatiya Nabheka Vidyut Nigam. In the last few years, the policy change has allowed the public sector units to enter into joint venture with NPCIL. The government would also, again, we have done that, would have to amend these acts so as to make sure that the private sector is integrated. With respect to the power distribution, the states would be allowed additional borrowing capacity of 0.5% of the gross state domestic product, but it would depend upon the kind of reforms they take in the distribution companies, right? In the overall distribution, power distribution. In the 2022-23, distribution companies accumulated losses of almost 6.48 lakh crore. Now, can you imagine 6.48 lakh crore? This is a huge number. Now, this is primarily because of the kind of aggregate technical and commercial losses which these discoms are facing. Then we have got the National Manufacturing Mission, where the focus would be on clean tech manufacturing. For example, we have the electric vehicles, we have got the lithium-ion batteries, we have the battery storage systems. So they would be, again, we have, for example, the solar cells and modules. So they would be focused upon in the National Manufacturing Mission. Now, again, the next aspect is the Urban Challenge Fund. It is primarily to boost the urban development, urban infrastructure, and implement the proposals for cities as growth hubs, creative redevelopment, and water and sanitation. Different models are being adopted, act as an incentive for cities to raise funds through the municipal bonds. Important. If you are asked to write what are the different ways to for these municipalities to earn money, right, to make sure that they have adequate revenue with themselves. So these are the ways: through municipal bonds, public-private partnerships, and loans. The finance minister has said that the fund would inject up to 25% of the cost for the bankable projects from this particular fund. Allocation of 10,000 crore is proposed for the year 25-26. Now again, this is a particular example. You can just have a look. Next aspect is the revamp of the small working capital loan scheme for the street vendors, that is Pradhan Mantri Street Vendors Atmanirbhar Nidhi, PM Swanidhi. Now this has benefited more than 68 lakh street vendors. Very good data. And it has given them respite from the high interest informal loans. So again, what they had to do earlier was that when they needed money, they had to go to informal borrowers, and they used to charge usurious rates of interest, very high rates of interest. And then they fell into the debt trap, right? Now what is happening is that because of this particular scheme, they can have easy access to money, right? So again, what we are trying to focus upon is the credit cards with 30,000 limit and capacity building support. The scheme was launched in 2020 during the COVID-19 pandemic. Vendors can avail loans up to 10,000, 12,000 and 50,000. Next aspect is the overall expenditure of 96,000 crores for the Housing and Urban Affairs Ministry, marking a 17% increase. So again, generally you can see that there has been increase with respect to the urban development, primarily through the Urban Housing Affairs Ministry. Just look at this length of new highways. So it's a good news that, and this data is important. The national highway network has grown by 60% from 2014 to almost 1,46,000 kilometers now. This is important. This data is important. Do remember. Next is installed power generation capacity. So if you just see that we have the coal, which still dominates to almost 219 gigawatts. Then we have got oil and gas to 25. Then got hydro to almost 47. Then got wind, which is almost 48. Then we got solar, which is almost 98. Then got the biopower, which is almost 11.35. If you talk about the nuclear, it's still quite low. It's almost 8.1 gigawatt, right? So this is something which you can have a fair good idea about. Now, talking about the capital expenditure which has been allocated to the Ministry of Railways. So the Ministry of Railways was allocated almost 2.65 lakh crore for the capital expenditure. The Ministry of Road Transport and Highways has also been given 2.72 lakh crores, the same capex allocation as in the last year's budget. Still, they account for almost 48% of the total capex allocation. So this is a very good number. Of the overall capital expenditure, you have the Ministry of Railways and the Road Transport and Highways, which account for almost 50% of the total allocation. The total estimated expenditure for the central government for 25-26 is 50.65 lakh crore, and the capital expenditure is 11.21 lakh crore. We have already seen in that particular chart in the analysis part. The capital expenditure goes towards building those assets that have long-term benefits and can potentially generate revenue. So this is a definition of capital expenditure. Revenue expenditure, on the other hand, refers to the expenses incurred in maintaining the daily operations, including salary, wages, right? The survey also notes the pace of the union government's capital expenditure. This was affected in the first quarter of 25, primarily because of the model code of conduct. So if you have a question which talks about the issues or the effects of model code of conduct, this is one of the points you can use. The Railway Ministry has said that given higher spending on capital expenditure, we expect to have more than 200 new Vande Bharat trains, Amrit Bharat trains, etc. Budget also allocates to almost 1.16 lakh crore rupees for the expenditure on the safety aspect, considering the number of accidents we have seen in the last few years, right? So safety is very important. For example, we have the Kavach system. So that has to be implemented on every stretch of the Indian Railways. Road Transport Ministry, key capex projects include the Bharat Mala Pariyojana to enhance the connectivity, the road connectivity to different districts across the country. Then we have got the Char Dham Mahamarg. Then we've got the national high-speed corridors, national highways wider than 4 lanes, advanced traffic management system, inclusion of artificial intelligence in the traffic management of the country, and multimodal logistic parks. Very important, so as to make sure that there is very efficient logistics, right? Because the logistics cost in India is still around 12 to 13% of the GDP, and we have actually made a target to reduce it to almost 7 to 8% of GDP in line with the developed countries. So this is what you need to know with respect to the infra part. So coming to the last section of today's discussion, so we have different articles in the Indian Express at page 8, 10 and 12, which talk about the kind of allocations made to different ministries. So there can be a probable question which talks about that which ministry has got the highest allocation, or which paramilitary agency among the all paramilitary agencies has got the highest allocation. So again, what we're trying to say is you need not to memorize the exact numbers, but have a track of the trend which is there, right? So in the wake of challenge of modern warfare, very important hybrid warfare, what we call as, and to modernize the military to counter the rival China, the union budget has allocated 6.81 lakh crores to the Defense Ministry, which is 9.5% higher. Very important information I'm going to read. The defense allocation is 13.45% of the union budget, which is highest among the ministries. So which ministry has got the highest allocation? It is the Defense Ministry. Of the total allocation, 1.8 lakh crore will be for the capital expenditure, which the government thinks is very important for the modernizing the armed forces and procuring the new weapons. The total revenue allocation for the armed forces is almost about 3.1 lakh crore, which is 46% of the total outlay. Just understand the kind of the effect which these salaries has on the overall budget of a particular ministry, right? Defense pensions has received 1.6 lakh crores. Of the total capital outlay, 1.48 lakh crore would be spent on modernization of the armed forces, while the rest would be spent on research and development. 75% of the 1.48 lakh crore of the modernization outlay would be spent on domestic procurement. Very important. We have been focusing upon the indigenization of the defense production, right? And this also calls in line with the Atmanirbhar Bharat policy. Further facilitate the Ministry of Defense plan to venture in new domain such as cyber and space and emerging technologies such as AI, machine learning, robotics. The budgetary allocation for DRDO has increased to almost 26,800 crores. This would strengthen the DRDO in the development of new technologies with special focus upon the fundamental research and handholding of the private sector. So again, we have to focus upon the investments, the research which the DRDO is doing, so as to make sure that the DRDO comes with those products and platforms which are at par with the kind of quality which the other countries are producing, be it the US or be it the China or be it Russia, right? Improve the border infrastructure and facilitate the movement of the armed forces. And now this calls for the greater investments in the border roads organization, right, under the capital head. Next aspect is that of the Ministry of External Affairs. Now, this has been allocated almost 5,483 crores. The ministry, the MEA budget. Now, this is important, and the reason why I've given is because India helps the other countries, its neighboring countries, with a specific amount of money, and that has been mentioned here. The MEA budget has placed an emphasis on the India's neighborhood first policy. 4,320 crore, 64% of the total scheme portfolio has been earmarked for the country's immediate neighbors, right? Large infrastructure projects, for example, hydroelectric plants, power transmission lines. Bhutan continues to be India's largest foreign aid recipient, receiving almost 2,150 crores in 25-26. India's allocation for the Maldives has increased. Obviously, it has increased because of the kind of interactions, the good interactions which we've witnessed between Prime Minister Modi and President Muzo. Afghanistan has seen an aid allocation decrease to almost 100 crores. Myanmar's allocation increased to 350 crores. India has maintained its allocation for Nepal at 700 crores. Sri Lanka saw an increase in its aid allocation to almost 300 crores. Aid to the Bangladesh remains unchanged at 120 crore, while aid to African nations rose to 225 crores. Data is important. You can, even if you don't cite the actual number, if you can just say that the aid to the African countries has increased according to the budget. So this is something which is a good point. Latin America's allocation has been reduced to 60 crores. Allocation for Chahabahar port, strategically very important for India to counter the Gwadar port, which has been funded by Chinese agencies. Chabahar port in Iran remains at 100 crores. Next aspect is the allocation for the Home Affairs Ministry, right? So again, it is trying to emphasize that the kind of allocation which has been made for the census, it says that again there would be delay with respect to the conduct of census in the country, right? The total allocation of almost 2,33,000 crore, and this is an increase of almost 12,000 crore. Major has gone to Central Armed Police Forces, responsible for internal security and guarding the borders. So we have the allocation for the border infrastructure, a sharp increase, 87% rise to be spent on the checkposts along the international border and setting up of the surveillance infrastructure. So again, this is because that we have been witnessing the infiltration bids, especially in the Jammu sector, especially in the Kashmir sector, and also when we talk about the Bangladesh, primarily because of the kind of issues, the chaotic situation in the Bangladesh, right? Also at the Myanmar border. So we are focusing upon enhancing, making the international borders more robust, right? Foolproof. Magnified focus on the borders come after increase over the last year's cross-border infiltration. Next aspect is with respect to the allocation made for the census. So just 574 crores has been allocated for this activity. Now this shows that there would be again a delay with respect to this particular exercise, the census exercise. This was supposed to be conducted in 2021, but it was basically delayed after the COVID-19 pandemic. Now if you look at the kind of allocations made to different paramilitary forces, we have got the Central Reserve Police Force, then we've got the Border Security Force, then we've got the Central Industrial Security Force, then we've got the Indo-Tibetan Border Police Force, then we've got the Sashastra Seema Bal, then we've got the Assam Rifles, right? You need not to memorize the numbers, but have a look with respect to the kind of priority which has been there. Union Territory of JK has been given 11,931 crore this budget. The Delhi Police has got an increased 11,931.6 crore. Can you just see? Delhi Police has a bigger budget than the Union Territory of JNK. The budget for the police infrastructure funding has been increased to almost 4,380 crores. Forensic and cybercrime prevention. Again, you can use these once you're writing questions with respect to the internal security. Just write that the budget allocation has been increased for these particular activities, be it the forensics, be it the crime prevention. 500 crore earmarked for the modernization of the forensic capabilities. Next aspect is with respect to center's subsidy. So the center's spending on the subsidies for 25-26 is budgeted to fall to a 6-year low in absolute terms and a 7-year low relative to the country's gross domestic product. Just look at this. So as a percent of GDP, right? So it's going to be almost 1.19%. And then if you look into the total terms, the absolute terms, it's going to be 4.26 lakh crores, right? Much of the outgo pressure is now coming from the fertilizers. So that what we are trying to say is that the reduction in the subsidy bill is primarily because of the reduced burden which we are having because of the fertilizer subsidy. So if you just look at the fertilizer subsidy, it has actually decreased from 1.71 lakh crores to 1.67 lakh crores. A total of 4.26 lakh crores towards the all central subsidies. The subsidy bill at 1.1% of GDP would be the lowest since 2018-19. Peaks of 7,58,000 crore and 3.82% of GDP was witnessed in 2021. Now, what are the reasons because of which we are witnessing a reduced subsidy? The very first is the discontinuation of the free additional 5 kg per month extra food grains, which were allocated to almost 81 crore people. The extra rice or wheat was given post-COVID period from April 22 to December 22. Now this has been discontinued. The above subsidy hit an all-time high of almost 5.41 lakh crore in 2021. The second major reason for the center's lower subsidy is the fertilizer. So what it is trying to say is that the fertilizer subsidy peaked at almost 2.51 lakh crores. Now this was primarily because of the Russia's invasion of Ukraine. See, if we talk about the kind of effects which global events have, the global headwinds, this is one of the reasons which you can write in the answer. So what effects do the global activities have on the domestic market? So because of these events, it was very tough for India to import and the cost increased. Then we also have the other thing, that the Red Sea area, right? So we had the movement of the vehicles which moved in the Red Sea area, but that was stopped because of the Houthi rebels, right? And they had to then cross, the ships have to cross the whole Cape of Good Hope, and then they have to travel the long distance, and therefore the subsidy burden increased, right? And it also took a lot of time. The budget estimates of 1.67 crore for the coming fiscal year is higher than what was provided in 24-25. Whether more would be required would depend upon the geopolitical factors. So again, what you can say is that if you have a situation where there is global turmoil, be it in West Asia or be it in the Russia-Ukraine war, that can definitely have an effect on the kind of increase in the cost for the government with respect to the subsidies. So this is important, but the good news is that overall the subsidy bill has reduced. Finally, we have this particular news which says that the insurance, the FDI in the insurance sector is going to increase from 74% to 100%. Again, what it is trying to imply is that once you will have different players in the market coming and joining, international players, that would give us a more better product and services that would enhance the quality. This would also make sure that the insurance penetration in the country, which is measured as the insurance penetration as a percent of the overall GDP of the country, right? And the insurance density, that is a per capita premium, that would see an increase, which at present it's quite low for the country. Again, please understand, as the disposable income increase, as the standard of living increase, the insurance is also increased, right? The premiums also increase. That actually tells about the social cushion which people have. So this needs to increase. Hope this major boosts insurance penetration in the country, which as per the IRDAI report was 3.7% in 23-24. The global insurance penetration at the same time was 7%. With 100% FDI, the foreign insurers will have the full autonomy to operate, bringing the sophisticated risk management, their managerial practices into the country, and therefore it would basically have a competitive environment for everyone around. Provide the much needed capital to the Indian insurance sectors, enabling the insurers to offer better products and services. Of the world's top 25 insurance firms, as many as 20 are not present in India now. So just see, we have only domestic players. So this particular enhancement in the FDI limit would make sure that other players also come, join in the market. There would be a competitive field, and therefore better products would be there in the insurance sector. To enhance the FDI limit, the government will have to bring amendments to the Insurance Act, Life Insurance Corporation Act, and the Insurance Regulatory and Development Authority Act. The inflow of foreign capital is expected to create new job opportunities. This is also very important, potentially lowering the premiums. Obviously, once you'll have more number of players providing the insurance, the overall premiums would reduce, right? It would spur competition in the market and therefore better products for the end consumers. Many international insurers can now enter the Indian market, which will drive the Indian insurers to adopt global best practices in products and processes, innovation, as well as cutting edge technologies. The insurance sector received the highest FDI in the services sector during the April-September period of financial year 25. This information is from the Economic Survey of 24-25. This segment accounted for more than 62% of the 5.7 billion equity inflows into the services sector. So can you imagine that the insurance sector is a very important part of the overall services sector, and therefore the enhancement in the FDI limit is definitely going to boost the overall services sector as well and going to give better products for the end consumer. That is it for today. I hope you really enjoyed the session. We have covered almost every aspect of the budget. Do let us know through your likes and comments. I wish you all the best. Thank you so much.